Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya
In the
Rahman.
name of God, the beneficent, the merciful. So I wanted to just welcome everyone here today. We have some great dignitaries here. One of the first things you'll notice, I'm not from the UK. So, because I know everyone's being mentioned is like, people are guests here from the UK. I'm like, hey, what about me, right? They're just leaving me out. That's all right. We'll let it go, right? It's all good. It's all good. But like John, last year I had the opportunity to come to New Zealand. It was my first time, and we didn't stop by here. We went straight to Christchurch, and I just wanted to kind of mention something that when we got to Christchurch, it was at a time when they had just opened the two mosques that had been attacked, and there was just this outpour of love. I mean, people that started, we pray at sunrise time, a little before sunrise, and people were waiting outside. And we were there all day, and we would finish at, 10 o'clock with our last prayer of the evening, and people were still there. Just the immense outpouring of love. And I remember there was this one young man, and when I walked in, he was sitting, and he was just staring towards the front of the mosque. Now, just to give you some idea, if you didn't get a chance to go at that time, the carpets at the time had been pulled out. The walls had been whitewashed. So the structure was very, you could say, bare bones. There wasn't too much ornamentation. And so I remember he was sitting there. He was just looking at the front of the mosque and just staring. And I went to him and I said, how are you? Like, what's, can I help you? And he just broke down. He started crying. And when he calmed down a little bit, I still remember him saying, that day I was supposed to come here for Friday prayers. And I got to the parking lot. I heard the shooting and I turned around and went home because I live really close by. And I lost some friends on that day. And I should have been here. I think he was experiencing what is sometimes called survivor's guilt, if you're familiar. So that's one aspect of being there. It was very heart-wrenching. And we were able to meet some of the survivors and things like that. But the other aspect, and the aspect that I think we want to highlight, is really just the outpouring. I got to tell you, I'm very jealous of the people of New Zealand, all right? And I mean that sincerely, because we've had our share of tragedies in the U.S. We had someone going into a synagogue and, finishing off people there. I mean, it was terrible. We had people, as you know, we have school shootings way too often, Sandy Hook, etc. And while you do have a lot of people in the U.S. that come out and, do show their support, it's not like it is here, And so from that aspect, I'm very jealous of you guys, because I really see within the people of New Zealand this genuine care and love that you guys share with each other. And I think that you should feel proud about that, right? And happy that you've got that sort of bonding between one another. Now, I don't want to go too long, but there is something that I feel like I do need to mention. And that is, we were talking about, people knowing each other and people knowing about Islam. And the reality is, if we want to start educating ourselves, I think a good starting point is understanding what Islam says about just being human. I think it was Plato that said that beauty is the splendor of truth. And one of the most beautiful things from an Islamic standpoint is the human soul. What makes a person human? There's a verse in the Quran, and of course the Muslims, we believe that the Quran is the literal word of God. So sometimes you hear us say, and God says. And so I'm going to kind of follow that tradition. And God says, and I'll say the Arabic first, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Right? Do not be like those who forgot God, so God caused them to forget themselves. Now, if you think about it, someone that forgets God, let's say they're not really thinking much about, that transcendent being, or what's going to happen after death. They're busy, right? Like many of us are. And that has nothing to do with being Muslim or not Muslim. A lot of us get busy, we forget God. But at the same time, when a person forgets God, they don't forget to like brush their teeth, you know, use the restroom, get up, whatever, go to school, go to work. So a lot of times you might think, well, what does this verse even mean? And what it really means, it has to do with the core of the human being. Because if you think about yourself, like I sometimes joke that, you know, we have a president in the U.S. who loves Muslims dearly. And I sometimes tell some of the Muslims there, I said, imagine now that our president said, look, you can't call yourself by a Muslim name. So, you know, if your name is Fahad, you have to go by Frank. And if your name is Muhammad, you have to go by, I don't know, Mo. If your name is Fatima, now you got to go by Jennifer. Whatever it is. But if that were to happen, does that change you as a person? And the reality is it doesn't. It's a name, no doubt, you have an identity, but at your core, there's something deeper than that that makes you, you. Or to give a different example, God forbid one of us gets into a car accident and we lose an arm, God forbid. Do you stop being you? No. You lose your other arm. Do you stop being you? No. God forbid you lose your legs. Do you stop being you? No. There is something that is you that is deeper than just your physical, material reality. And that thing that's inside of you, from the Islamic tradition, from our theology, from our belief, is the human soul. That's what gives you a consciousness. That's what you're able to understand things about the world. You're hearing me speak. That's because you have an inner conscious state, which the Muslims call a soul, or a ruh. And that's what we're talking about when we say that there's a certain beauty in every single human being. Because from the Islamic tradition, one of the things that we hold as core is that every human is born in a state of goodness. We assume every human is good. And that's not about whether you're a Muslim or a non-Muslim or whatever it might be. Our assumption of a base state is that every human's good. And that's why when you look at things like Islamic law, the assumption is innocence until proven guilty. In fact, that's, I think, a human law, right? You guys have that here in New Zealand? It's not guilty until proven innocent? Okay. I don't know, that's changing a little bit in the U.S., so I'm just making sure. All right. But that very law goes to the heart at what does it mean to be human. One of the things that we assume, again, as Muslims, and I would say even non-Muslims, we assume human beings are pure, are innocent, are good at their core before they're evil and corrupt or whatever it might be. And I think that's an excellent starting point when it comes to us understanding each other. Because one of the things that makes us human, besides our soul, is the fact that, from the Islamic tradition, we're not God. For us, we believe that God has the complete knowledge of everything. And what makes us human is that we don't have knowledge of everything. And one of the reasons you find people hating other people is because we assume certain things we think we know. And the reality is, you don't know the other human that you're talking to, that thing that you've made assumptions about. You don't know what sort of financial problems they're going through. You don't know what sort of background they're coming from. You don't know what kind of drug addiction they might be going over. You don't know what they just had an argument with their wife or husband, whatever it might be. You don't know. And so the Quran, God, when he talks about the entire purpose, we created you from a male and a female. From our belief, it's Adam and Eve. And we made you into nations and tribes, لِتَعَارَفُوا, so you may get to know each other. And so I think it's absolutely important that one of the things that this tour we're trying to do is for us to get to know each other, to bring ourselves together. For Muslims, I would say it is a deed, it is an act that transcends just us being humans, but it's an act where we say it's something that we worship God by doing that, is by knowing our fellow humans and understanding and not making assumptions. I'll leave you with one thing. I used to work for a company in the U.S. as an accounting firm. Anyone in accounting here? I mean, we are outside the economic. You're in accounting? All right. I feel bad for you. Anyways, I don't do it anymore. All right. So I was working for this accounting firm. We had grueling hours. I was in an area known as taxation, and we used to have 12-hour days. It was insane. I think one night I actually spent the night at work. And I got up. It was crazy. I locked my car was in a parking lot. They closed at like midnight, and I got there at 12:30, and I was like, my car's locked. I'll just go back to work, right? So it was crazy. But I remember there was a woman who used to work there, and I don't know if you guys have office politics, but people would always say, you know what, she's late every morning. She's she might not do her work like the way she's supposed to, and maybe she leaves early sometimes. And I would always tell them, I said, maybe she had some issues. Maybe there's some trouble. Or maybe, she's a single mom, cut her some slack. And this happened like once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. Eventually, when I came in, and they're like, guess what Judy did? And they said, well, she did so-and-so. And I said, well, maybe. They're like, just stop. Why are you always giving her excuses? And my response is because we don't know her entire situation. Our very, being human is that we don't know the entire gamut of information that what makes Judy, Judy. And the reality is, until we're able to give each other excuses and come together on these common terms of understanding that we are human beings first, from the Muslim perspective, who have souls that make us beautiful at our core. One of the things is beautiful, or beauty, is not a rational endeavor, by the way. It's actually something that you just recognize. And I'll leave you with this. You will never come to a situation where like you're with your wife, or like, let's say I'm with my wife, you're looking at a beautiful sunset, and you say, honey, that is absolutely gorgeous, that's beautiful. And she says, that is the ugliest thing I've ever seen. Rationally prove to me that that's a beautiful sunset. Beauty doesn't work like that. Beauty is when you have human connections and you recognize it immediately. So that's basically what I wanted to just cover real quick. I wanted to, again, thank everyone for coming out. It means a lot to the Muslims here, across New Zealand. And in fact, it had an impact to Muslims all the way in Houston, Texas. That's where I'm coming from, if you can believe it or not. The Muslims there, we were affected by it. Our mosques implemented certain things just by modeling some of the policies that you guys have placed in here. So you have an effect. No doubt you're looking at New Zealand, but New Zealand has an enormous positive impact on the entire world, and I commend all of you for that. Thank you very much.